Hello, and welcome to Central Booking, where writers and readers are the authority. I'm your host, John Valeri. Today, I'm joined in conversation by Connecticut's own Lynn Sheft, debut novelist of The Deadly Game. As the book opens, Lauren Casey's husband disappears on a biking trail, only to later turn up dead, the victim of an unknown assassin. A grief-stricken Lauren is further shocked to learn that it was a case of mistaken identity, and that her husband's look-alike needs help in bringing the responsible parties to justice. It's an emotionally resonant, action-packed story, and one that plays out against the backdrop of Miami at large and its picturesque Coconut Grove neighborhood. A New Jersey native, Lynn earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Miami and then established an award-winning career as a copywriter and creative director in South Florida. Additionally, she wrote for magazines, provided editing services, and taught ESL classes as an adjunct instructor. After relocating to Connecticut, Lynn turned her attention to writing full-time. Her short story, A Tryst with Fate, was included in the anthology Seascape, the best New England crime stories. She's a proud member of Mystery Writers of America and Sisters in Crime. In a 5-star review of her novel, author Ange Pompano said Lynn Sheft weaves a gripping tale of suspense in her debut novel, The Deadly Game. The author's knowledge of South Florida is obvious and makes the read that much more enjoyable. She's a writer to watch. Now, Lynn Sheft discusses how taking real-life situations and asking what if colors her crime fiction. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Central Booking. Today, I am excited to be in conversation with Connecticut's own Lynn Sheft, whose debut novel, The Deadly Game, is available for your reading pleasure right now. Welcome to the show, Lynn.
Well, thank you so much, John, for having me tonight. I will enjoy having an opportunity to talk to you about it.
Thank you so much. How you say that now? We'll see how you feel later. Anyway, so, we were just saying before we started recording that you sort of really made the best of, your pandemic time by finishing up this book. And so now you are a debut novelist. You have this great novel that we're going to talk about. And I wanted to ask you about The Deadly Game because, like so many stories, it actually has its origins in a real life situation, a game that your husband used to play on you. So I'm wondering if you can talk about how you revisited that moment. You said, what if? And then you sort of did, and had a jumping off point for this book. So tell us about that.
Well, my husband and I would go for bike rides when we lived in South Florida. Specifically, we took these bike rides through Coconut Grove, it was a very quiet area with little winding roads that would go through all the area of Coconut Grove. It was very peaceful. But my husband is a funny guy and he likes to play jokes. So he would come up behind me while we were riding the bike. He would go past me, keep riding, and I'd lose sight of him. And I'd go, well, where is he? And I keep riding, and all of a sudden he'd come up behind me and tap me on the shoulder. And I go, ah! I would scream. I would nearly fall off the bike. Well, eventually I got used to it. But I thought this was a very funny thing. So I kept riding, and one day when I was riding, I thought, he disappears on me. I wonder what if he disappeared and I didn't see him again. So the author's mind goes, So that developed the story. I said, okay, but it took me a long time to write this novel because I didn't want to kill my husband. Right. I had to suspend, him with the character.
Right.
Eventually I got to that point when I said, okay, I can do this. So that's when I started writing the novel. And I said, okay, he gets knocked off, but, he was not involved in any criminal activity. So I tried to figure out, well, what happened? So my mind goes, well, mistaken identity. I've always been into that thing of look-alike because I was mistaken for another person several times in my life. I'll tell you about that later. Anyway, so I figured he has a look-alike, and the look-alike, the other person was the one who was intended to be assassinated.
Right.
when it hits the news, the guy who put the hit out realizes he made a mistake. So that's how I got the idea, and I was off and running with that plot.
I love it. See, this is how a writer's mind works. I mean, you take this sweet little game and all of a sudden it becomes very sinister. I love that. But, people ask about writers. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. You take something that and you just twist it almost beyond recognition. So, we talked a bit about obviously how this book borrows from your personal life and from that game that your husband used to play on you, but it also borrows from your professional life back in the day. So I'm wondering if you can tell us about your heroine, Lauren Casey. She has a career that you're intimately familiar with. So what is her job and how does that lend itself to intrigue?
Well, I was a senior copywriter for a major advertising agency in Miami. And my job was to not only write copy for newspaper ads or radio commercials or TV commercials or whatever, but I also would produce videos, sales presentations, that sort of thing. And so I figured in developing this novel, how was I going to expose the killer once I knew who actually the man who put the hit out, how he was, how to get him. And I realized that through a video presentation, that could be the way it is. So I could, because I knew how to produce videos and get around things, and I knew I could produce this video without anybody knowing about it and surprising everybody. So in advertising, at least in my role, I was not supervised very much because I was a senior level person and I could just do as I pleased. So I got away with it.
Sure. And you know what I love? I love, how integral her job really is to this book, because a lot of times I feel like, the crime and the investigation don't necessarily have to do with the person's job, but they're expected to work. So they show up at the office, they shuffle papers, they answer the phone, the scene is done, and then they can go back to the crime. But these two are really intimately linked, which I love because there's no filler. It's a straightforward story. But I wanted to ask you too, you mentioned Coconut Grove, which is around Miami. I mean, it even sounds beautiful. It is beautiful. Can you give us a sense of place and tell me how you think it is that place enhances plot? Because they work very well together in this book. And you lived, in Florida, and now you're a resident of Connecticut. Yay. But you can tell, you have a sense of place because you lived there. And so you're able to render it very authentically on the page. And it's kind of like a little mind trip for those of us who haven't left our house as much. So tell us how you use what you know to set the scene.
Well, I lived in South Florida for my whole career until I moved to Connecticut. So Coconut Grove is a very wonderful and really a romantic place because there are no highways through there. It's all little roads, tiny, 2-lane roads, cute little neighborhoods. It was formerly a really tight artist and writers haven until they all fled after some years to where parts unknown. Anyway, Coconut Grove, you drive through there and, you drive through Main Highway or Ingram Highway. There's all these canopies of trees overhead, shadows everywhere, which creates intrigue to me. A lot of roads going whatever which way. A lot of side roads going off little 2-lane roads. You can hide yourself anywhere. And so I found that it was really good to use Coconut Grove in all its windy roads, and that Lauren could, when she was being pursued, they were trying to kill her, that she could find ways to get out and hide.
Right.
And that creates a lot of intrigue. There are outskirts of Coconut Grove, like Kendall, where Lauren lives, which are more open and residential, where the assassins could find out where she was and whatever. But and then the rest of the state, I mean, I had Craig Richards going to Naples. So that's another part of Florida that is really cool, but it's, known as God's waiting room.
Right.
But that was a perfect place for Craig Richards to hide out. And, in all the waterways in Florida were great because I could create these boat chase scenes and stuff. And it was just, it's just a fantastic place for crime fiction, which this book is. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I found it really perfect for the setting for this book.
Yeah, it's terrific, and it really is like a mental vacation for those of us who can't be there right now and who would love to be. But also, I love the juxtaposition of taking a place so seemingly idyllic, and then these things start to happen. And I love appearances versus realities, and that's sort of a great thread that you pull throughout the book. And you just mentioned the Craig Richards character, and I wanted to ask you a bit about him because he is actually the look-alike for Lauren's husband. He was the intended target of this crime. And so they actually, they end up coming together and they sort of have to rely on one another in the pursuit of justice. Can you talk a bit about that? Because it's an interesting dynamic, given that we have a new widow who is now sort of forced to team up with the man who looks like her recently deceased husband.
Yes. She is absolutely shocked when he contacts her. He sees the news and realizes what has happened. He contacts her and she's absolutely shocked. She can't not believe it. And then when they meet, she's absolutely shocked that she actually gets physically ill because he looks just like her husband. So it was very, very difficult for her to team up with him. But she wanted justice for her husband. She knew that, no one's going to believe her. And she didn't. And he convinced her no one's going to trust it. And if the news got out or he went to the police, he knew that the antagonist would absolutely intervene and they would not have justice. He would see to it that one way or another they would be silenced. So it was brutal, but they decided to team up together and solve this crime and put this man to justice. So it was a dynamic they both totally were committed to.
Right. And a really clever pairing. It really made you think. I was like, what an awesome idea. Kind of heartbreaking and heartrending for him, but such a clever idea to put them together in that situation. And I did want to ask you too, so it's called a suspense novel, and we sort of sometimes in the community, argue about what's a mystery versus a suspense novel versus a thriller, and where the difference lies, who knows? I think that's another mystery of it all. But I would say this book is very much thriller-esque in the sense that it's not a whodunit, because we know pretty early in the book, whodunit and why. So really the issue is, how is this going to resolve? Is justice going to be done? Are Lauren and Craig going to survive? So can you talk about the differences between, the whodunit book versus this type of book? And do you find that it's harder to maintain suspense when you know who did it? Or is it easier because you're really just pitting your characters against each other and seeing where the chips fall?
Well, I never felt confident in writing a mystery. But when this idea came to me, I knew I could create suspense because, there was one thing would lead to another. I mean, once knowing that Craig Richards wasn't killed, someone else was murdered in place of him. I knew that it would be like a domino effect. If one thing would happen after another, which creates suspense. So you have to stay one step ahead of the game in creating suspense. You always have to make the reader feel like, well, what's going to happen next? And this format really lent itself for suspense, because to say that the protagonist was going to come to justice, there were a lot of steps to be taken. Craig Richards was instrumental in the novel to do that, and so was Lauren. I mean, she had to do her thing in the ad agency, and he had to do his thing to stay ahead of the game and not be assassinated in any way, because the assassin was after him and he was fleeing, and then Lauren's fleeing. So it was very exciting to me, because when you're a writer, their conversations are in your mind. I mean, it's like, you'll even cry, or you'll even get scared, during the whole writing process. It's a really amazing process.
That's great. And I love too, it's so fast paced. There's a lot of action to this book. Like you said, there's chase scenes on the water, there's car chase scenes. So it plays out really, really rapidly, which is kind of fun because you find yourself very immersed in the story. So it sounds like, you were immersed in the writing of it, and that obviously translates to us as readers. We definitely get that sense. So well done on that. And I did want to ask you too about another interesting relationship dynamic in the book, because Lauren has a really good girlfriend named Judy, and they have a really wonderful relationship, both personally and professionally, because not only are they friends, but they work together. And the thing I like about this is a lot of times in fiction, you see women, who are competing with each other and sometimes backstabbing each other, probably more often, when they're sharing the work environment. So can you talk about just the genuineness of their friendship and how it points that heightened suspense, but then at other points it kind of evens out the suspense for a bit so everybody gets a bit of a breather?
Well, this Lauren and Judy, I based Judy on a friend I had who I was teamed up with in the ad agency. So I kind of based it on that kind of relationship where she was a confidant. And so Lauren could confide in her and what was going on. And Judy provided a safe haven for Lauren while she was going through this whole mess. And Lauren was scared, and it was also a good place in the novel to explain the backstory for Lauren's relationship with her husband. So that was good. And then, of course, Judy was there for her every step of the way. As soon as Lauren told her what was going on, Judy came to the rescue and was there, and to comfort her and that sort of thing. So it showed a really close relationship between two women who really relied on each other. And like I said, I really thought about it as my relationship with this friend that I had before.
That's terrific. And, even reading it, I was thinking, all right, this has to be based on reality, just because Judy does come off as such a, full dynamic character, whereas a lot of times, secondary characters pop up and it's more for convenience. But she's really terrific. And I have to say, and I'm not going to give anything away, not really anyway, but I think one of my absolute favorite scenes in the book is there is a situation, where Judy's doing something and all of a sudden she realizes that she may be in a bit of danger. And it's just one of those sort of got you moments. So I just wanted to say that, it's worth reading, just for that one scene, but I really liked what you did there, and I'll just kind of leave it at that because I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, a lot of fun to do that.
Yeah, that was terrific. So, all right. So I'm going to take you back just a couple of years now, because I remember reading an interview with you not too long ago, and you had mentioned that it was in the 8th grade that you realized sort of your storytelling abilities or potential. So I'm wondering if you can take us back to that moment, tell us what the epiphany was, and how you still remember that, when you're calling on the entertainer part of yourself today.
Oh, well, that moment stays with me. It will stay with me for my whole life, because when I was in 8th grade, my teacher assigned us all to write a story, a true story, and it had to be entertaining. So I remembered just like a couple of weeks before that, I volunteered through the Girl Scout troop to make cupcakes for a bake sale. So, I was like 12 years old or so, or I guess that's 8th grade. Anyway, my mom wasn't home from work yet. Both my parents were working. So she trusted me in the kitchen. So I said, okay, I'm going to make the cupcakes. I did make the cupcakes. They came out fine. I had never made frosting for cupcakes. So I went through my mom's Good Housekeeping cookbook, and I found a recipe for boiled frosting. I followed the recipe, and I knew nothing that boiled frosting had to reach a certain boiling temperature with a candy thermometer. I didn't know about that, and I didn't have one anyway. So I went ahead and boiled this thing, and I said, well, I guess this is how it's supposed to look. I had no experience. So I turned off the heat, and I put this frosting, what it was supposed to be frosting. Of course, it was soupy. So I put it on. It looked terrible. But I said, well, I guess that's the way it's supposed to look. So my mom gets home, and she says, what is that? I said, I made cupcakes with the bake sale. She says, what's that on top, that gray stuff? I said, well, Mom, that's the frosting. I made boiled frosting. And she says, that's not what it's supposed to look like. I said, oh no. I tasted the stuff like that. And it was all grainy, and it was disgusting. So I wiped it off with a sponge. Can you imagine? I wiped this cupcake off with a sponge to get all of it. So anyway, that done. That was my story. So in front of 8th grade, I relayed this whole story to them about what I did with the cupcakes, and they roared with laughter. They thought that was the funniest thing they ever heard of anybody doing, that they would actually do that and then take the cupcakes to the bake sale. So I knew that I had entertained them. I made them laugh, and then I was hooked. I knew I was a storyteller, and that's what a novelist is.
I love that. And, if you can laugh at yourself, I think that you have, a pretty big step up on some of the crowd. That's a great story. And I have to say, you were in 8th grade learning these things. I'm 39 and I'm still learning these things. So, All right. So let me ask you too, something else that I had come across that you mentioned, in coming to the decision to self-publish this novel, is that you attended a webinar with a literary agent, and people were asking, how do you sell your book these days? What's the best way to do that? And she really said that thriller, mystery, suspense novels were a tough sell because a lot of authors were doing better, financially by doing it themselves. So can you talk a bit about, what she shared with you and how that helped to shape your thinking in terms of how you wanted to publish this book?
Of course. When she gave this webinar, she was saying what was selling, what was not selling. She said that suspense novels and thriller novels were a tough sell to editors. They really couldn't sell them to them. And so when she finished her webinar, there was an opportunity to ask questions. And I said, would you please tell me why it's a tough sell? She says, because so many of them, of the authors of this genre, are now self-publishing, and they're doing extremely well, and they're making good money. And so the publishers are saying, we can't compete. We can't compete with the money they're making. So they decided to just forget about that genre. So they're still publishing mysteries and memoirs and other genres and whatnot. But so I said, well, suspense thrillers, that's my genre. What am I doing beating my head against the wall, sending out hundreds and hundreds of queries over the years, and nothing's happened. And I had mentors through Mystery Writers America. They told me my work, my novel was very, very good. I should seek a literary agent because it's publishable. And when I heard that, I said, maybe I should think about self-publishing. And I have other friends who are authors who self-published, and they encouraged me because they had read excerpts of my novels. So I said, well, I'm going to give it a try. See what happens. It's better than that novel just sitting in my computer.
Right. Sure. And, you know, it's interesting. I'm old enough now to reflect back on it. I can remember when self-publishing first began, to what it is now. And there's been a complete sort of shift in how we view that, because it is very much a legitimate thing now. And there are people who are doing it very successfully and very, very well. And so I'm wondering, you know, in looking at your experiences, can you talk a bit to the people out there who might be considering, you know, self-publishing, and just tell them, you know, a bit about what the best practices are so they can really prepare themselves to put out a good product if they decide that this is something that they want to do?
Of course. I went on KDP, which is Amazon's Kindle publishing format, and they make it easy to publish. You can just download it to their software program or whatever. And I did that initially, but when I looked at how it looked, because they'll format it, they only give you 3 fonts to choose from. And so I downloaded my book and they formatted it, and I looked at it and I thought it looked horrible because, you know, having an advertising background, I know about fonts and leading and the format of how things should look, that they look professional. And I looked at this and I said, this looks terrible. So then they offered a way to make a book cover. And I looked at that and I didn't like the options. They were very, very limited. So I said, this is not for me. I've got to do it myself. So Amazon lets you do it yourself. So the first thing I did was to look to do a cover. So I got an account with Shutterstock, and I found a photo that I thought would be intriguing that you see there, because the book trip, the bike ride and all that, to me, that without knowing where you're going, that looked intriguing to me. So I decided on that photo. And then I went in to actually format the book, which is another program, which I did. And it's time consuming.
Right.
But I was able to choose the font that I liked based on readability. You know, a serif typeface is much more readable than sans serif. That means without the little extenders on the letters. So I found what I liked based on my background in advertising about readability. And I found something and I formatted the book. And then I found there were little glitches when it was formatted that I didn't like. So I researched that and how to eliminate that. And I found how to do that. And then I finally was satisfied with the book. And then I downloaded, whatever you call it, and then got a look at it and went through the whole book again. And then I was satisfied. And then I published it. So you've got to take a lot of time and energy and thought and have somebody else look at it too.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that, because it really is, you know, it's a process and it's very time consuming. And I know a lot of people get frustrated with it, but you want to be happy with the finished product, because that's what people are going to a lot of times base their opinion on. And they're even, you know, we say don't judge a book by its cover, but everybody does it. And I have to say, I love this cover because, again, it's sort of the sweet and sinister. It's the perfect entry point for the story, because depending on how you look at it, you know, this can be, ooh, a nice bike ride in the woods, or ooh, a not so nice bike ride in the woods, and very bad things happen. So I can understand why that appealed to you. So let me ask you too, I love that not only, you know, are you very busy with the writing itself, but you're a very active member of sort of the mystery community at large. You belong to a lot of organizations, you advocate for other authors. Can you talk a bit about that? And also, can you tell people who might be looking to form a community or to make engagement with other people, what might benefit them and how it's benefited you?
Well, as a writer, you're lonely. You sit there by yourself. Okay. So knowing that, I when I first started writing, when I was in Florida, there was an article in the paper about a meeting with Mystery Writers of America. So I went to that meeting and I met people and made friends with them and started going to their meetings. And I felt I had a sense of community. I could share my writing experiences, my questions with other writers, and they would share their experiences and in the path to being published. It was a very exciting way to figure out my whole career. And I would ask for advice from people if I didn't know something. Then I came to Connecticut. I continued my membership in Mystery Writers of America, again, for the sense of community. And we had a lot of meetings. I think I met you at one of them when we had our luncheons in Haven. And since then, I also joined Sisters in Crime. And it's not limited to just women, by the way. Men are also welcome. But again, another sense of community. Sisters in Crime for Connecticut has now started a new chapter. So that's good. And Mystery Writers of America also has a Connecticut group so that we can have meetings. It's that community feeling is really important because, like I said, it's a lonely craft. You're by yourself. And the only company you have are the characters that are in your head.
That's so true. And such a good point too. I mean, writing is such a lonely endeavor. And then you realize, oh, that there are other people just like you know, going through this every single day. And the thing I love, you know, about the mystery community is it's so supportive. Everybody is so supportive of one another. It's not like people who feel like they're in competition with one another. It's really people trying to lift each other up. So I would highly encourage, you know, to listen to Lynn and look up Mystery Writers of America or Sisters in Crime, and you will probably find your tribe. And the really cool thing, and I'm going to see if I remember this correctly, I love reading acknowledgement sections in books. Sometimes they're my favorite part. But you were talking about how through MWA, you had sort of a mentorship. And I think I read that Tom Savage was one of your mentors. And how cool is that? Because he's great. And Valentine is probably one of my favorite books, you know, in this genre of all time. So can you speak to that just briefly?
Yeah, well, when I entered my pages and got feedback, besides getting some critiques and what I should do, you know, to improve it, it lifted me up because I got encouragement. I knew that what I had done was worthy and that I should pursue my writing. I mean, it gave me the confidence to keep going. And I've done that other submissions also in subsequent mentor programs and did the same. And when you get a critique from people who are published and known, it's, I don't know, it just makes you feel better and you know that you're on the right path rather than feeling like, oh, this is no good. It made you know that it's good. Keep going and just, you know, make it better and edit it with the comments and it's going to be publishable.
Sure.
So this thing happened also with these contests that can happen that you can enter. I did another one, I think it was 2 years ago. I entered a short story that I had, you know, definite criteria. Enter that, and I got feedback from that, and that has spurred me on to turn that submission into another novel.
Yeah, that's terrific. And sometimes you just need somebody else to say, yes, it is good enough. Because I think we're so close to our work sometimes that, you know, it's very easy to not think that it's worthy. But I guess, you know, my takeaway is if Tom Savage says you were good enough, you were good enough, and happy hour should probably start early that day because that's a reason to celebrate. All right, so just a few more questions for you, and then I will let you get back to life. But I always ask, you know, for those people out there who are really wanting to get into writing and maybe a bit hesitant, if you could tell us what the best advice that you were ever given is, and then the best advice that you were never given and had to learn for yourself just throughout the process of actually doing the writing.
Well, I guess the best advice I got, I was at a Mystery Writers of America it was Sleuth Fest in Florida. And I attended a workshop on writing the novel 101. It was excellent. He was the man who did that was a professor at, I think it was the University of, not South Florida. Anyways, yeah, I think maybe West Florida. Anyway, besides that, he was very good. And he suggested that anybody who wanted to write a novel was just don't sit down and write, but to write an outline. He suggested do a page on every character so you knew who the character was. Just writing it made the character firm in your mind, which I have done, even the little characters. He also said write an outline of every chapter, which I do. And that way I know how the book's going to end.
Right.
Because another person who I was friends with, she had started to write a novel and she didn't do that. She just wrote. And then she realized that she backed herself into a corner, and she just dropped it and never wrote again because she knew she'd have to throw everything away and start over again. So I said, as a copywriter, every minute counted.
Right.
Because, you're paid. And when I was freelance, you're paid. So you don't waste any time. You want to get it done on time and not waste time. So I was always conscious about the time I spent. Time is money. So outlining to me is perfect. I know there are a lot of people they call pantsers. They sit there at the seat of their pants writing. But I can't do that. I'm just such a planner. I just have to plan everything out. What I did learn, I guess, without anybody telling me, was to trust my intuition. Because a lot of people will critique your work, like if you give it to friends, they don't know where you're going with this. Right. And make comments that don't jive, like they want to rewrite your novel into another genre, I guess. I sent something recently to a friend and she was trying to change the novel into a suspense novel, and that was not the genre I'm writing in. So I said, I'm just going to go by what I believe in, my intuition.
I think that's, such important advice because, a great point, because you can, send your work out to two people and get three completely different opinions. And you really do have to decide, what to take in that criticism versus what you believe in, because, at the end of the day, really, who knows your story better than you? But really, really good point, because it can be very hard to decide who to listen to, especially, for writers. We have so much crippling self-doubt at times, but you can get steered in a direction that you don't want to go. So people should certainly keep that in mind. And final question for you. So everybody's going to, pick up and read The Deadly Game, and then they're going to say, that was great. What's next? So can you give us a little teaser of what readers might expect next from you?
Well, probably in September, the end of September, probably, I am publishing a new suspense novel called Saving Maria. Saving Maria was inspired from me teaching at Broward College. I was teaching an ESOL class, and all my students were immigrants from other countries. And this one woman was from Bogota, Colombia, and she sought political asylum here in South Florida. She had been kidnapped by FARC, which was the rebel group in Colombia at the time. This was based like 1998, when they were kidnapping people all over the place, all the rich Colombians, and they would hold them for ransom. So she was kidnapped and held ransom for like $2 million. And her father said, no, I'm not paying it. She's married. Her husband's responsible. So she was held for 4 months. And eventually, Colombia has a special forces that the United States trained actually, but when Bill Clinton was in office, it was called Galva. And the United States trained these people on how to rescue victims of kidnapping. So she was freed, and then she sought asylum here in the United States, in South Florida. So I thought, well, when she discussed this with me, I interviewed her with her husband, who helped translate because her English was limited.
Right.
I interviewed her and she told me the whole story. I saw the TV video of her being rescued. And I was so overwhelmed what she had gone through that I said, well, you're here now. And what if? The question, what if you're here now? Can you go back to Colombia? And she said, no, I'm here as a political asylum. And if I go, I'll lose my green card. So I said, well, what if somebody was sick in your family, like your father or something? She says, well, I can't go. So I thought, well, that's the source of that story. She's here in South Florida, and her mother calls her. The book opens with her mother calling her and tells her that her father is dying of kidney failure. So she wants to go back, but she's in a dilemma. She goes back, she'll lose a green card. And also, the FARC rebel had told her after she had escaped that they found her, they would kill her. Because this family was driving around in Bogota, Colombia in an armored car, bulletproof car. And that's why they left. And it took them a year to get their green card. So anyway, the story goes, she tries to figure out a way to go see her father in Colombia before he dies. He's on the list for, kidney transplant and all that. So she hopes that she can get to see him before he passes. So that's what that story's about. It has to do with her trying to get back there and how to be disguised.
Wow, that's incredible. And this is, kind of full circle, because we talked about how The Deadly Game, is inspired by something true to life. And this too, is inspired by somebody that you encountered. So that sort of just shows the importance of those what if moments. We began with a what if, we have circled back to a what if, and I guess that's as good a time as any to say goodnight. But before I do, I have to remind people that they should pick up The Deadly Game by Lynn Sheft right now. Thank you so much for being here and sharing so generously with us, Lynn.
Thank you so much for having me, John. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about The Deadly Game.
That's it for this episode of Central Booking. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a thing.